Yes, thank you, Mr. Adams. And just to pick up where Deputy Lawless left, don't wish to give up that power is the phrase you use, and then in the next page it's all about democracy. The distribution of power was the outcome of the democratic elections, some of which Sinn Féin contested here and some of which they didn't. But you accept that it's a democratic outcome, and it will always be a democratic outcome, the distribution of power following an election, surely. Fair enough. Thank you very much for coming in today. I've watched you since I was a child and you will be aware that I have disagreed profoundly with your interpretation of history and the justification for violence. I would come from a different nationalist tradition, but I also recognise very strongly that you were the person that, whatever about any earlier involvement or incitement or connection to violence, you also brought an end to it, and we're in the position to be able to do that, and I really want to acknowledge that. What I'm struck today about your paper, about the future and moving towards the future and reconciliation, and our different perspectives today in relation to the full implementation of the agreement. To my mind, the full implementation of the agreement is a genuinely reconciled island, a genuinely reconciled North, a genuinely reconciled Northern Ireland, a genuinely reconciled island in its totality. And part of that, I do think the government has a strategy in relation to that, which is about the shared island. I get the sense from your paper that that's something that you reject as a strategy, and that your view of the reconciliation of that is limited to the border poll. And I would like to tease that out with you a little bit. The second question that I have for you is in relation to acts of reconciliation. And in page 8 and 9 of your statement, you acknowledge the need for that. And I just wonder if you can outline sort of substantial examples taken by yourself or your own party in relation to that, in particular in relation to unionism, as you have suggested is most important. And then I have one other question, Chair, please.
Well, I do think the shared island is a good initiative. I said that in my remarks. My main point is that the shared island is not a strategy to bring about the full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement.
That's where we disagree.
It's good. I mean, it's a good thing. Of course it is. But why don't we have a Charter of Rights in this state? Why don't we? We can poke the finger at the Brits and say, you haven't done this and you haven't done that. This state hasn't brought in a Charter of Rights. Sorry, Carl.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have it from the EU. We're members, we have a European Charter of Human Rights.
There is a specific commitment in the Good Friday Agreement for both governments to bring in a Charter of Rights. It has been tried in the North, and the DUP have set their face against it, so it gets tripped up and all of that. But anyway, I'm trying to say this positively, by the way. I'm not saying that to score a point. I don't care, I'm no longer in public office. I'm sort of trotted out occasionally on occasions like this to have these discussions, but I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Well, I think it's fair to say you're still deeply influential, Mr. Adams, no? You're still deeply, and your voice carries a lot of weight with Sinn Féin.
Yeah, well, I'm not, in all modesty, I'm just making the point that there is a responsibility in this government, and I'm responding to your point. I'm saying, yes, you're right about the shared island, that's a good initiative. But what else has been done and what else could be done? In terms of acts of reconciliation, I don't want to get into this too much because some of these issues folks mightn't like to be have their particular experience rehearsed here. But one of the things that which I thought was for me personally, and I have met many victims of the IRA, many. But one particularly always struck me that I met a family whose brother had been killed, and it actually isn't clear to this day whether he'd been killed by the IRA, but he had been killed, and the family certainly had a sense that might have been the case. So they had spent a lot of time trying to meet Republicans and trying to get somebody to talk to. And eventually it came to my attention, and I met with them. And they told me about him, and they told me about the incident in which he was killed. And at the end, when I responded, at the end when they went to leave, and I met them again subsequently, right? And they said that was the beginning of the rest of their lives, because somebody listened to them.
Yeah.
And because somebody who was seen to be a person of influence sat down and just quietly listened to their story and responded. And they said that they went home euphoric. I met them here. They went home euphoric, home back to Belfast. So there's
Exactly.
a small, very tiny proof of the notion of dialogue, and I just offer it up as an example of acknowledgement and recognition.
Thank you.
And so on.
It's hugely important, and thank you for doing so, because I believe as Irish nationalists, reconciliation is the Irish imperative first, and that that is the objective. So when you talk about reconciliation in your paper, but the language that I picked up from it, also as an Irish nationalist, was Tory government, Unionist death squad, DUP intransigence, and the Irish government no effective strategy. And to me, it wasn't the language of being able to look to the future. It wasn't the language, and at the same time, as Senator Curry said, no acknowledgement whatsoever of a campaign of killing 3,600 people who died. And you used throughout the course of your statement, in the meantime, while you were waiting for a meeting, you have all these atrocities in the prisons and the streets and so on, while you were waiting for a meeting, as though Sinn Féin and the IRA had nothing to do with any of that. So what I'm saying is that what you're saying in relation to the future and reconciliation and the acts of reconciliation jar even today with the language that sticks out in your paper. Two things that came up in the course of our work on the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, specifically around reconciliation. Two issues in particular, and two examples of reconciliation that are yet available to be made. One of them is, and as you've highlighted correctly today, the Pat Finucane situation, and as both of the houses of the Oireachtas have acknowledged. But what we don't treat with equivalence in the Oireachtas, and I don't believe has come yet from Sinn Féin, but I hope it will, is an equivalent treatment of the death of Edgar Graham. Micheál Martin and I have acknowledged it in the Dáil on his anniversary. But he was also a lawyer murdered in Northern Ireland. And can we get to a point where we can treat those two deaths with equivalence? And a second example, in this committee, exactly 12 months ago, was we had the families of the disappeared here. And as Senator Curry said, we have our little badges, which we're probably not supposed to wear, but we're wearing them anyway today, as others do on different occasions. And Michael McConville, in his contribution, said on that day in December 2021, that his final contribution was, I have always wanted the IRA to apologise to our family for murdering our mother. I know it has apologised by saying it to everyone at the time it admitted to murdering these people. All I wanted was for the IRA to say it was wrong in murdering our mother and that she was not an informant. She was not an informant, and it has been proven that she was not. This is testimony given to our committee as examples of reconciliation that can yet be made. And I asked these two examples, would these be on the cards? Would these be things, as an influential person in Sinn Féin and the Republican movement, that you could recommend to Sinn Féin as major examples of a reconciliation that could be made?
Well, the IRA did apologise for all of those people that it shot and secretly buried. It made a public apology for that, and it made clear that that those actions were wrong. And there may be, I give you one example of a quiet, and sometimes these matters are sometimes, if that's the wish of the bereaved or the victim's family, are sometimes better carried out quietly, because that's what people want. But if there are other actions, of course we're obliged, all of us, to look at these and to try and find some way to bring healing, because a healing process is central to moving forward. So that's come at all of this in a very, very positive way.
So does that mean, I'm so glad to hear you say that, does that
Well,
mean
I've
that
said
you
it
would
before.
make that statement?
I don't know how you missed me saying that.
No,
before.
Mr. Adams, sorry, I didn't miss you say it. What I repeated, though, was following that statement, that Mr. McConville had his interpretation of that given to his testimony to this committee just 12 months ago. So he had also heard those comments by the IRA, and he was more specific in his follow-up. So that is not an answer to his question, he would say, and did say in this committee 12 months ago. So I'm asking something more specific, more taken further
I'll
than
give you
that.
my answer as best I can to that.
I understand. And the question of Edgar Graham and Pat Finucane and the equivalence of those tragedies?
Well, in all of this, there needs to be, if we preach the word equality, there also has to be an equality of victimhood. So Edward Graham is as much a victim of all of this as Pat Finucane. You could, of course, distinguish between the fact that the British state collaborated in the killing of one of the officers of the British judicial system and actively recruited, trained, armed, and give intelligence to those who carried out. So there may not be an equivalence between the state carrying out these actions and an armed group carrying out these answers. But for the victims, there obviously is an equivalence of loss, of bereavement, of grief, and so on.
Thank you.